Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sync Up Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things OneDrive. OneDrive is the home for all of the files that you care about most, and we are here to take you behind the scenes to get the insights and the knowledge to make your experience and your users' experiences better. My name is Stephen Rice, and I'm a Principal Product Manager on the OneDrive team, and I am joined by my fellow OneDrive aficionado, Arvind Mishra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Arvind, and I'm also a Principal Product Manager on the OneDrive team. Before we get started today, we have a little bit of a PSA. If you haven't already, please sign up for the OneDrive newsletter at aka.ms/OneDrive/join. It's full of the latest news delivered directly to your inbox. You don't have to do anything. It comes to you.
You do it for something, Arvind. You have to sign up for the newsletter, and then it comes direct.
That is true. You do have to do something, but once you do that, it comes to you. So today, we've got a great set of discussions and topics for you, our listening audience, including an interview with Steve Bailey, our corporate vice president for the ODSP Experiences Engineering team, and a discussion with John Selbie, one of our esteemed engineering managers here in ODSP.
But before we can get into that, Arvind, like every other podcast on the internet, we need to pay our bills. So we have, I'm excited for this, our first official ad read.
This is very exciting. We actually have a paid sponsor.
This month's episode of the Sync Up Podcast is proudly sponsored by Microsoft SharePoint Premium.
That used to be called Microsoft Syntex, right?
Yes, it's got a brand new name, but you know, Arvind, SharePoint Premium is an amazing collection of advanced content management products and services that are all about helping you get more done with your documents.
Oh my gosh, and we love documents.
We do. You can organize, analyze, create, sign, and manage all with ease. Even better, our friends over at Microsoft SharePoint Premium have an offer just for our listeners and everybody else.
That they do. Through June 2024, you can now get a limited amount of free monthly usage of select SharePoint Premium pay-as-you-go services. This includes content assembly, e-signature, image tagging, optical character recognition, and my favorite, document processing.
You do love the document processing, Arvind.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited. I'm shaking.
Just head on over to aka.ms/meter-promo for more information. Again, that is aka.ms/meter-promo. Thank you again to Microsoft SharePoint Premium for sponsoring this episode of the Sync Up Podcast. And now, on to our interview with the CVP of Engineering for OneDrive. We are here with Steve Bailey, who is the Corporate Vice President for OneDrive Experiences Engineering. Steve, welcome to the show. Excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Let's kick things off for folks who may not be familiar with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your background and how did you come to the OneDrive team?
Yeah, I've been at Microsoft it's like 29 years this year. Very long time. Yeah, I meet a lot of people here that joining Microsoft they weren't even born when I started, which always freaks me out. But yeah, like a really quick short summary, I started in developer support. Then we built Outlook Express in the era of Internet Explorer. And then from there, I went to SQL Server and got into database stuff for a few years. And then left SQL and we started kind of this sort of side project in Windows, and that eventually kind of turned into SkyDrive. We got, as part of Windows Live, and then SkyDrive kind of grew up, got renamed, and here we are, 17 years later after starting OneDrive, still plugging away, and now working on SharePoint as well.
That is just kind of incredible. I think actually, as we record, this is the 10th anniversary. I think I saw this morning of the SkyDrive to OneDrive rename.
Yeah, exactly. I always mark the beginning of SkyDrive OneDrive when my daughter was born, because that was the day we moved into Windows Live and formally started on this project, the very, very beginning. So yeah, October 2006 is sort of the date that I usually always go back to as the very beginning.
That's super cool, Stephen. I was going to ask you, because we have some overlap with you and Jason Moore, who we talked to about 6 months ago with Project Max or Project M, as you were calling it. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience on that? Because that's sort of like the proto version of OneDrive, if I remember it right.
Yeah, well, Project M was kind of this funky project that Hillel Cooperman was running, but it kind of came out of this rising from the phoenix of Longhorn. If everybody remembers Longhorn, Longhorn was like a version of Windows that was really trying to like make this big bet on a bunch of new technologies, WinFS, Avalon, this .NET framework, managed code, like it was a massive big thing, and then it eventually like became clear that it was going to take a little longer to ship, and they kind of reset the project and sort of removed a bunch of the bets on new technology. And so Project M kind of arose as like a sort of an app to keep building on all that tech to try to keep the vision alive. Yeah, we sort of worked on it for about 2 years. The idea was that we were going to reinvent the Windows Explorer, based on all this new cool tech. And we made it a little ways. We did some cool stuff. Really, we were really like keen on like cool visuals and stuff. But sort of like this weird thing happened when we were there. We all started using this little program we found on the internet called Folder Share. Ryan Hogue, some folks from Microsoft. Microsoft eventually bought this product, but it was sort of this magical thing where you could basically sync a folder across the internet. We all started using it to share files, and we were using it to run our project. It was just magical. It just worked. There's always those times in, it's software where you use some product and it's just like, wow, this thing's amazing. Like, some of us started thinking like, geez, this thing is cooler than the project we're working on. And when we got moved out of Windows and into Windows Live was kind of forming, and to sort of be this services that backed Windows, sort of like very early in this sort of internet journey. This was like before people had broadband and such. But when we got moved into Windows Live, that's when we sort of decided to really go build sort of, we called it a file locker. We didn't even really know what it was at the time. Like there wasn't a Dropbox or Google Drive or, like there was no products like this. Again, like broadband wasn't even like prolific like it is today. And so, we were kind of trying to figure out like, yeah, let's go build a product around this idea of folder share and like sharing files across the internet. Let's go explore that, so that's where Project M and a lot of the team that was on Project M sort of ended up being the team that sort of started SkyDrive. So yeah, that's sort of the background of Project M.
Did you ever think at the time you were building SkyDrive that you would end up here, CVP for this massive OneDrive and SharePoint product team?
I really felt like folder share was this like pure magical thing. I mean, it's like such a geeky tool, you know what I mean? Like syncing a folder of files across the internet. But I'm kind of a nerd, just seeing that somebody could build that in a way that it just works so easily. Now it was confusing to use. Like it's like hard to use.
All V1 products, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people trying to use folder share, it's like you needed a computer science degree to kind of set it up. But once you had that, it was totally, amazing. And so that's what sort of sparked that vision. And yeah, I was like really keen on the idea. Like I kind of just had this feeling like, oh, this is going to be huge, And I like to work on like big ubiquitous stuff, and it just felt like, yeah, this could be a big thing. And when we started, I think we got a lot of the same feedback that like Dropbox got when they shipped, which is, people are like, oh, no, you're just a feature. This is not a product. Like this should just be built into email or instant messaging. That's the thing that Windows Live people kept saying is, this is just an email feature. Like, why are you building this? This is stupid, And so, we worked on it for a couple of years and we kind of didn't really know what we were building. And I think it was 2008, 9, or 10, like right in that 3-year range is when it kind of became clear that, okay, this is going to be something, like something important. And the company kind of started getting more and more serious about it. Just this push to the cloud, was happening at that same phase for commercial customers as well as consumer. And so when that started happening, then it became a big thing. And then that's sort of when OneDrive Consumer and SharePoint came together. Yeah, that's when it got super real. And then we just took off from there.
So for folks who maybe aren't familiar with Microsoft nomenclature, so you're a corporate vice president, a CVP. What does that mean? What does your day look like? Where do you spend your time on average,
It doesn't, I don't think there is an average. Like, it seems like every day there's different things. It's kind of fun part of the job is being able to be involved in so many different areas. And so, but I would say like in general, like the big themes are obviously like engineering, architectural, type stuff, spend some time there, but I have a bunch of really great people work for me and highly competent people. So, they're mostly solving a lot of that stuff, engineering culture, making sure that we're just amazing at quality, performance, fundamentals, that's like something I'm really passionate about. So I'm always, just making sure that we're raising the bar there. Resource allocation, since you guys are in OneDrive SharePoint, this is always a hot topic of, are we investing enough people in the right place? So that's always a big discussion, just, where are we allocating people and, where are we investing and, are we doing that correctly? And then product, I actually love playing a role in the product definition. My PM peers let me sort of play a role in that, which is nice. Hopefully it's not, they just don't think I'm cute, but I love playing a role in the product and business side of things too. So
you've earned your position there, I think. You've earned the right to weigh in on product.
Yeah, you're a CVP. So,
but yeah, those are probably like the biggest areas I would say. But every day, it's like the downside of the job is sometimes, you're kind of getting pulled into a million different things all the time. You know what I mean? And so it's really important to try to make sure you're always spending your time in the right places, because it's very easy to get sucked into a million things and then kind of get peanut buttered. So just time management is probably the other aspect of the role that's critical.
So with that, I mean, time management, I could see why, because you're spread across a lot of things. It's now 2024. We just started the year. And so what are some of the things that are top of mind to you? Like, what are some of the things that are keeping you up, at night, or things that are getting you really excited?
Well, definitely, like, we run, I think, one of the largest services and products at Microsoft in OneDrive, especially as it spans, consumers to commercial governments, humongous service. And so quality, performance, security, privacy, just all of these fundamental things, just, accessibility, just making sure that our engineering team is top notch, because our customers, we want to build more features and stuff like that. But, our customers, the number one feature they want is just rock solid software. And so, just spending the time to make sure that, as a team, we're continuing to raise the bar and, we have the right discipline in terms of quality and, testing and, monitoring and, just all of these things, just really making sure we're great there is probably always the thing that I worry the most about. And then on the exciting, things I'm really excited about is just the AI stuff, as everybody knows, probably maybe getting tired of hearing about it, but there's just so much possibility with everything that's happening right now. And so just all the fun that we're having thinking about how to use this technology to help customers, remove drudgery from work, make people more productive, make work more fun. That's the place where I'm spending a lot of time in my team right now, both with engineering and product, just sort of explore and figure out ideas. We're not even totally sure what's going to work. So we're just, what's fun about it is it feels kind of startup-y. You're kind of coming up with ideas. Maybe we're going to try things really quick and get customer feedback and see if it works or doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, okay, let's move on. Let's try something new. That type of iteration is always really fun to be involved in. And so that space is really exciting for me right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Steve, what are some of the challenges of running a product as large as OneDrive?
The scale at which we run at is incredible. And when you look at some of just the raw numbers about number of files uploaded per second and petabytes uploaded, a day or month, it's the numbers are mind boggling. We partner pretty deeply with Azure on a bunch of our infrastructure. And so obviously that's what gives us, really massive global scale and footprint. And so we're not having to do it all ourselves. This is a whole Microsoft thing. I think the main thing is really just about security, reliability, performance. In the normal scenarios, everything is usually fine, we're pretty stable. It's always these edge cases or, things that can go wrong that we don't control. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a data center that had a bunch of snow on the roof and the roof caved in.
Yeah.
We have pictures of a data center with snow sitting on top of racks of servers, and we failed out of that data center. We have a lot of geo redundancy and resiliency, and all of the services that we're running these days are really super mature in terms of their ability to handle failure. Now we're not always perfect, and so every type of outage is always this opportunity to learn about some sort of new failure pattern and then go build the right level of resiliency into the service. But beyond that, I think like the hardest challenge is like measuring like, are our products meeting like customer expectations? Sometimes we have this problem where like all of our telemetry is like great, like we're running at like 5 nines, everything's perfect. But then you go look at customer feedback or you talk to customers and you'll always find people are unhappy, that with something. And so then it's like, why does our telemetry say everything's great? But then, it's clear that like from, NPS or customer feedback, we have clearly some problems. And so, trying to like really close that gap on like, are we really measuring the right things? Like, are we really measuring our product experience and through the lens of customer expectations? And that's really like the front that we're on to now, especially in my team. Yeah, just really getting down to like making sure that our products actually meet expectations so that we don't have to rely as much on customer feedback as like a way of making sure our quality is improving.
All right, Steve, I've got one kind of last question. So later in this podcast, we're going to be talking with John Selbie. Did you have any feedback maybe you wanted us to provide to him potentially? If you want to go through his performance review, something we can pass along.
Yeah, well, John is an awesome, like kind of old school engineer, Microsofty. I've worked with John, I think, 20 plus years now. He's worked on OneDrive for a very long time. Classic Microsoft engineer, and manager, who's very deep in the code, very strong engineer, but great at running a team. I always see like interns that come through John's team and they always have some of the best feedback because John just runs a team that's, like super inclusive and all the engineers are like really close knit. And there's just this like camaraderie that John, I know, always creates in the teams that he has. And so love John. So thank you, John. You've been on OneDrive, I think, as long as I have. So yeah, thank you for everything.
All right. Well, as a kind of final note, Steve, if folks want to find you online, is there a place you prefer to be reached out to or for folks to follow you?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn is probably the place where I'm most official. I don't post much online, so use it to keep connected to a lot of people that have left Microsoft, people I know. So that's mostly how I use LinkedIn. But yeah, that's the place to find me.
Excellent. Next up, we've got John Selbie. So let's talk to him and see what's going on.
I can't follow that, what just happens. That's like the little podunk, band that started out of the garage, playing after Metallica kind of thing.
It's great to have you. John, let's kick this thing off. Like Steve has said that both you and he are collectors of lucite because a lot of lucite because you guys have been at the company for so long. But let's start by like you telling us a little bit about you.
Sure. I am an engineering manager on the OneDrive and SharePoint team, specifically my current team of 7 engineers. We are a subset of the OneDrive Android team. Maybe about just a little bit less than a year ago, I made the switch over to the mobile realm and have been very happy with that effort ever since. Our team's charter is lots of features on Android, specifically with an emphasis on photos, but we get our tentacles and all kinds of things on that app as well.
Before OneDrive, I was just looking you up because you are super accomplished. You worked on exciting projects like NetMeeting and Sidewinder and Vista, which I also worked on back in the day. Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about the early days of when you started off?
Yeah, so I came to Microsoft with as a kid straight out of grad school who, just recently cut his hair and wanted to get professional. And I had an emphasis, a little passion for, the internet was this nascent thing that was coming out in the 90s that I was all about and all over. And really the thing that I was really passionate about was media streaming, just the concept of audio and video that could, stream and people could have real-time communications with each other. So NetMeeting was the predecessor to the predecessor to the predecessor of this app that we're using right now to talk, if you think about it, right? Which is from NetMeeting, there was later, I think it was called Office Communicator. Office Communicator became Link. Link became Skype for Business, and then Teams, for example. And then the whole WebRTC thing also took off as well in the recent years. But 1997, there wasn't a whole lot of, of that kind of consistency and quality. So what was really fun was just getting people talking to each other, the communications, just, it was kind of a magical moment, in the 90s that you could turn on a computer and then, with the dial-up modem, you could be, talking to grandma and seeing her at the same time. That was what really attracted me to the NetMeeting team and to Microsoft at the time. And then later, I went over to the Sidewinder team. There was a app that we worked on called Game Voice, which was a microphone headset and USB product for chatting within games effectively, so PC games. So that product probably wasn't the most successful product. It was actually the most fun product I've ever worked on. But I think what was key to that point is that tech eventually made its way into the Xbox at the time. I wasn't part of that Xbox transition, but sort of the knowledge and learnings, there were some people in PMs that went over to the Xbox effort to go make that happen over there. So if you remember, the original Xbox had the voice headset. That was the selling point of Xbox Live at the time. Same codec, some of the same tech to some degree, and the rest is history on that. I'd worked on, I think in my early days at Microsoft, I was bouncing around teams and product groups, just, kind of like trying something out new every couple of years. So that's why might have been a bounce from like NetMeeting to the Games org to back to Vista, back to the hardware org again, back to, and so forth. And I found that, I really wanted to settle down and really like make the career actually happen effectively. You actually have a good career as opposed to, a journeyman approach to it. So I found refuge in what was then the MSN Messenger team, later the Windows Live Messenger team, and I had a nice 7-year stint over there. Eventually became what they called dev lead at the time, and that's now what we would call an engineering manager these days. As that project was winding down in favor of, I think we had just around 2011, Microsoft had acquired Skype. And I think it was becoming obvious that, Skype was going to be the more promoted chat client over Messenger at the time. And then I started hearing, there's all this noise and all this excitement around this project called SkyDrive at the time. It seems like everyone I knew was going over there, or it was on the bullet point of every PowerPoint presentation that I saw. And I was kind of intrigued, something new, something different. And to make a long story short, I found my way over there and had worked on the Sync client for maybe 10, 11 years before I came to the Android team. So that's my history at Microsoft in a brief nutshell.
That's a very extensive career. It's awesome.
Yeah, I always love when your history on a product can be described in decades. Like, and then I spent 10 years working on the OneDrive Sync client, making it the best thing ever. Like, that's just incredible to me.
Yeah, it was, I would say that things that I worked on 10 years ago are quite different than what I work on now. The role kept evolving. The team obviously evolved. Little mini reorgs would happen, and then, the team would lose a charter, take on another charter, and I always just tried to adapt with it and convince the team that we need to adapt with these changes as well, because change is inevitable. We always try to find success that way.
That's a good slogan for the Sync team, right? Like, change is inevitable. That's why we have the Sync team to make there's something there. You've got this amazing history at Microsoft. Like, how has the engineering process changed even in your time at the company? Thinking back to like old Office days.
I love telling the story about how in my NetMeeting days, how we would ship, and it just sounds so archaic compared to how we do it today. For example, just to give a case in point, the Android client is shipping something new to the Google Play Store every week, either a new beta or a new production release. As a matter of fact, for a while, we were shipping so fast to the Google Play Store, Google was actually throttling the builds that we were submitting to them because we were shipping too fast. Let's compare that to what, the 90s was effectively, basically what Microsoft would call its, software development lifecycle model, or was a modified spiral model, if you remember that from software engineering class. But effectively, it was just a series of waterfall models. And that's not really what the fun part of this story. The fun part is that you'd have these engineers work on a product, not really that much different than what we do today, except for one key difference is that you had a dedicated test organization. So one set of engineers would write the code, another set of engineers would actually go and test it. And so I could check in a piece of code on any given day, and the next day it would get tested on. Like somebody would actually go manually try to validate, if I broke anything, if the feature that I checked in was actually working up to spec, or if it had bugs. So what's evolved, now is that we don't actually have anyone with the title of test engineer at Microsoft, or even software design element engineer and test. Eventually, over time, those roles all merged. Test engineer and design engineer and test merged into one role, and then ultimately software development engineer and test and software development engineer and test merged into one role as well. And so the biggest change, and I'm going to get to how this impacts the ship cadence, is that now that we have, combined engineering, if you will, the engineers writing the code are also the engineers, responsible for the test collateral, testing and quality and whatnot. That actually, in some ways, you would think, well, by having the separate dev and test roles, that's a lot more efficient, right? The devs can just pound out as much code as they can. You got someone else that'll test it for you. And I think that over time, things that you've got two different orgs basically working on the product, one team deciding how it gets built and another deciding when it can ship effectively. In this internet age of apps, especially on mobile apps, even on desktop as well, there's an expectation that, we can't wait 3 to 6 months for a bug fix effectively. And when you had a dedicated engineering team that had no influence over the code that was being written, but they were responsible for the quality, it seems like they were always playing catch up to what was getting checked into the code base effectively, just trying to, keep the test collateral in line with what the engineers were doing. And the challenge with that is that it was really, really super expensive to do incremental updates to an app. So you'd spend a year, shipping an app effectively. You might have 2 or 3 betas in there. But let's say the product goes out and then a week later a really bad bug is found. You might spend 2 days trying to figure out what month you're going to ship that fix in effectively, because the cost of doing that test pass was just so expensive effectively. So at some point that evolved into, let's combine these engineering teams together. So all of a sudden, those SDETs are actually in the exact same team as the development engineers. Everyone's now got the same title, and now everyone's actually responsible for writing their test effectively. So I think that forces engineers to think from more of a test and quality mindset. Like if I'm going to write out this new feature or this big blob of code, I might want to think before I start coding or start designing, how am I going to test it effectively? Or how am I going to write, test automation around that so that the next day, if there's a regression caused by someone else, that's going to get caught right then and not weeks later. So that is, I believe, the reason why we're able to ship so much more frequently. As a matter of fact, when I was on the sync team and we were shipping a new sync build to the Microsoft org every day. So we were shipping, an alpha to internal Microsoft users every day. Just everyone that worked at Microsoft gets an update on their desktop. They don't even know it. They've got the new build. And then, then eventually we had ways to get that up to a beta audience and then to the production audience within a month. But just the idea of shipping 500 million client updates a month, never mind the bandwidth cost on that was just unheard of, many years back. And I think that the fact is that, when you put the burden on the engineering team that they can't ship their product unless they fix it, as proposed before, is that we can't ship an update until the test team catches up to us. You put the burden on the engineering team to actually go after that and solve those problems. And it didn't come overnight. I think the big thing was just, a lot of effort being put into, and this is across all teams, service, web, mobile, desktop, and whatnot. Everyone just had to put in the effort to get the reliability of their product up and validated by tests, so that when you cut a new build every day, the test run alongside it 3 or 4 hours later after those tens of thousands of tests run, and they're all green and they all pass. You don't need, a manual tester to come in and actually say it works or not. You've actually got high reliability just by, your own code testing it. Now, I will say this, since Steve is still on the call here, he's probably the most prolific tester. If there's any remnants of a test engineer, it's probably Steve, because things do get through the gates every now and then that should have been caught. And that's why I think it's really great that we're self-hosting this product on a daily basis. Doesn't matter if it's on the web or on your phone or on your desktop. Us within our own organization, we're going to see something wrong sooner than most people will perceive it, and we can jump on that pretty quickly as well and let each other know about it.
There was a point where I had my title was distinguished engineer, but John and the Sync team lovingly called me distinguished tester.
Our most expensive tester ever. Like, John, I'm pulling out a couple themes for like how we as an organization have like evolved over the last decade. So we've got, the combination of like SDETs into like, engineering. And so that's just essentially became one role. So the responsibility was put on our engineers to up that quality. We automated a ton of testing as well. And we probably have really good coverage at this point to allow us to release things with confidence, knowing that they're secure and all of that. With all of that behind us, like, what else can we do to go faster, to be more responsive, to improve our quality if it can be? Like, what are suggestions that you'd like to see happen in the engineering org?
That is a great question. And I think that continuing investment in all the signals we can get on quality is a good thing. I would say, and we've gotten, so much better at this with different types of ways that we measure these metrics with telemetry. And I think Steve's actually been harping on a new one lately. Is that internal, Steve, or not? That the one that starts with the letter A?
It's called ASHA, but that's just an internal acronym. But yeah, I was alluding to that in my section about sort of, it stands for aggregate session health, which is basically like a new instrumentation model that we're adopting that makes us as engineers think about how to measure the customer experience versus like, did the code work? So we're moving to that. The Office team is heavily like invented this and is very heavily using it. And we're bringing it to all of our client products currently.
Yeah, so I think, Steve, you're harping on something interesting. There's reliability of the product that a lot of our tests measure. And then, there's also we can always keep investing in performance as well. So it's one thing for the service to work 100%. It's another thing if it works 100%, but it takes 10 minutes to download a file, for example. That would probably not be a great customer experience. So, and while we do have those metrics in place to catch anything like that can happen, measuring, I think the thing that we really are trying to get at here is measuring the pulse of the customer's like of the product, if you will. So it's one thing to see that all the telemetry says that the files are in sync and all the pages refresh correctly and that they logged in successfully. But I think we can continue to improve on, how happy our users are with it and really understand what's frustrating them. And I think that's something that can be done in a myriad of different ways. Should we do more surveys? Should we be looking more on social media to find out what people are complaining about? Should we do more focus groups? And then how can we actually bring that into the product code so we don't have to ask them a week later if what we changed actually improved anything? I think that's the big challenge.
So, John, I want to follow up a little bit on that kind of customer side. So many of the people listening to the podcast, hopefully right now, are customers. They use the product. Many of them have probably had a support issue. Something went wrong in the product. Something didn't work right. They send it off into the ether, and then sometime later, Microsoft issues our official response. And so I want to kind of shed a little bit of light. When a customer files a bug and it gets routed, goes through support and ends up on your team, what happens at that point? What does it look like for the Microsoft side as we triage those issues and then respond back to the customer?
So when an incident is reported more than once, first of all, they go through, a customer calls up Microsoft support, or as you said, emails the ether or hits one of those support buttons. Eventually, if the same issue is reported multiple times, or the customer just cannot get through, the first tier of engineer just can't solve, after we go through the normal, like, can you try rebooting? Can you try restarting? And they just try to get the customer, to reset the state. Sometimes that works. A lot of times it doesn't. We got to go. Eventually, we will get to the point where they could be talking to the engineers either directly or indirectly, or they'll be providing us details of their device, their hardware, their login. And we do have ways to get at their telemetry directly. We can look at some of their logs online to figure out what activity was going on there and see what the error was caused there. Occasionally, we might need to have them send us something or try to repro something. But if it gets on our radar and we start engaging with them, we're usually pretty committed to trying to find a fix. And the enterprise customers have this a little bit easier. They actually have, a lot of them have a more direct support line to us. They can actually, implicitly without them knowing, they might accidentally wake up engineers because they're that important of a customer. The big goal, though, is that we've got to look, because there's a million different issues that come in on any given, maybe not a million, but there's thousands of incidents logged. And it's hard to say, is it a customer mistake, a customer perception, or something legitimately wrong that the product did to their device or whatnot. And unlike like a little website that, where you're posting comments on, this is people's files. This is people's data that's important. That's why we need to take this very seriously. But I think the main thing is that when we do engage, when we finally, an issue gets escalated by our support team to us, there is different like classifications of a priority 1 versus a priority 4. But anything that, involves a customer's data loss or, makes the product unusable effectively, we really want to dig in that as fast as we can. I can't say we're perfect at it. I can't say that every customer gets to talk to me and Steve directly, but occasionally they do.
Speaking of bugs and issues, we have a lot of younger engineers, both internal and external, that, listen to this podcast. I don't know, as a young engineer, if I were to come in here, I would be scared that I might break something or mess something up. I'd love for you to tell our young engineers out there, like maybe what is a catastrophic thing you might have done over the course of your career? What happened? How did you recover? How did you realize that it wasn't like the end of the world? Or how did your manager get you to think that it wasn't the end of the world? Can you share some of your war stories there?
That's probably an entire podcast by itself on screw-ups that I did. But I think the one recognition that I had in the last 5-6 years was the importance of ramps. Let me explain what ramps are. Even when the product isn't auto-updating, we actually have a lot of our places, whether it be web or mobile or the sync client, those clients are actually pulling down a little data file from the web periodically that actually dictates product behavior effectively. And we can turn features on and off effectively such that we don't have to go roll out a new build immediately. So say, for example, we've added a new, photo editing feature into the Android app, for example. And we test it, we dog food it, Steve likes it as well, and we start to roll it out. And then we hear through all this.
It passes his test bar, right?
Then we hear all these rumblings something's wrong with it. It turned the image upside down. It's crashing. We can immediately just go into a little web service and say, feature off. It's disappointing for the customers that see that thing suddenly disappear off their device. And then we can go, but we stopped the bleeding, as we say, to go fix it. Now back to, I used to think ramps were just for big, huge, humongous changes, new features, big revisions, if you will. And I kept getting encouraged to say, even the most innocuous of changes, maybe not necessarily even like a UI change effectively, or just adding a new checkbox to the settings dialog, or, reorganizing a layer of code, if you will, even a refactor that's supposed to be where there technically should not be any product changes or any behavior changes. But because you've moved this stuff around, so in code, we can actually say, if ramp on, run the code this way, else run it this way. And it's a good habit that I started building up and encouraging on the team is that just put all your changes behind a ramp, which is, it's a little bit more effort for the engineer to actually go code it that way. But we always have that safety switch when we roll out. And sure enough, that has actually saved our butt several times. I think there was a feature, back to your saying, I think there was a feature that it's just this really, I can't remember what it was, but there's this really little simple feature that should have been simple. And there's an engineer on my team that had made a few mistakes. He was new to development, made a few mistakes that would cause the product code to crash. And I was like, each time I think I said, all right, let's go fix that null pointer crash, or let's go fix that. And he'd go in there and fix it, and we'd check it in. And I'd apologize to the other engineering managers for shipping this crash out. We get the hot fix out or whatnot. Week later, the next line of code crashed, that kind of thing. And I think it was like 3 or 4 times. So they're like, okay, I've gotten the ramp religion here. I'm going to make sure that everything, is, even if it looks like, the simplest of changes, we got to keep the code fairly clean. We got to keep ourselves protected, because anything can go wrong at our scale effectively. And that's sort of the downside of maybe, you don't have someone that's actually testing your code the next day. So, the burden's on you and your team to get the quality right. The alternative to actually having, all those resources spent on manual testing is that we've got to keep investing in just making sure that those switches can be turned on and off as fast as possible.
100%. Thank God for ramps, as John Selbie would say. One last question, just again for our young engineering audience. If I'm an engineer, why am I picking ODSP engineering? What would you say to that engineer that might be deciding to come and join our team?
First of all, I love the people. That's why I've stayed in this org for as long as I have. I would say this. Maybe in the old school days of Microsoft, you might feel a bit of competitiveness, not just with your peers, but with your management chain as well. I don't get the sense of that in ODSP. I feel like, everyone knows the mission here. Everyone's focused on quality and just making great customer experiences and having a good business as well. And, I think we've all rallied around that such that we don't get paranoid that, making a mistake is going to be detrimental to our careers, or if I don't, align myself with the right feature or the right person, that, that's going to be detrimental. We all, are very supportive of each other. And like I said, I think, we're all dedicated to the mission of file collaboration. With that in mind, I think, we do spend a lot of time. We really do want to mentor people, especially new hires straight out of college. We want to train them to be the best engineers they can. Hopefully, they'll stick around longer and we'll get to see them blossom into senior and principal engineers that can, be the leaders themselves.
So, John, and then actually, Steve, if you want to jump in on this question as well after, in the spirit of supporting and ensuring that, we all feel like one team and no one's above others, what is your best Jason Moore story? Like, you both have been on the team for a long time. I can't resist the opportunity to take Jason down a peg.
Let me say this. I absolutely love Jason. He's the guy that you see bump into the hallway every other day, and he's got a story for you, or he's got some industry insight. Anytime you want industry insight, either within Microsoft or outside, he's got a perspective on it. He can tell you why some other company's stock is moving in this given direction, or what the industry trends are and what we should be doing about it. Anytime you want just industry insight, Jason is the guy to go to. And, if he's got the time, he gives you the time effectively. But I worked with Jason long enough to remember, I worked with Jason a little bit when he was in Windows Live, when he literally was just, another PM down the hall, if you will. And one thing that I think makes Jason really successful is just his, outgoing personality. And he really wants to tell you about things that he's experienced. And a lot of his experiences are interacting with other executives around the company, other executives or industry leaders at other companies as well. And he loves telling you about it. As a matter of fact, I think I started to see that pattern emerge where this was when he was the group program manager of Sync before he became the VP that he is now. But there was a PM or a spec review. Can't even remember what the feature was. We were all in the room. It was 3:00 in the afternoon, and somebody said, should we wait for Jason to start? And I just said, no, and here's why. I said, he's going to do the same thing he always does. He's going to walk in 20 minutes late. He's going to sit in that chair over there. He's going to plop his feet on the desk, and he's going to say, sorry for being late, but I was with some big executive, and I was going to, and I want to tell you everything about him. And then everyone, okay. We wait a couple minutes. He doesn't show. Then they start the spec review. I could not have scripted that better. He walks in. He sits exactly in that same seat, puts those same feet up, and goes, I was talking to this executive in Windows. You guys need to hear what they're doing over in Windows. We need to align ourselves. And the room is just crackling, laughing at this point. And he's like, what's going on? And they just say, Selbie kind of predicted what you were going to do.
I can totally see the comparison because they're both very big, gregarious type personalities. So that's actually a good one. And I'll definitely keep that in the back of my pocket. Well, I think this is bringing our show to a close, Stephen, and our esteemed guests. Thank you so much, John and Steve, for joining us today. Stephen, I know everyone can already find you on LinkedIn. John, where can people find you?
LinkedIn's a good one as well. And you might even see me over in Reddit on the OneDrive forum occasionally because that's another great way that I find I connect with customers personally myself and find out what they're complaining about as well.
Awesome. Stephen, do you want to take us out from here?
If you want to learn more about OneDrive and the latest and greatest, you can check out the blog at aka.ms/OneDrive/blog. You can sign up for the newsletter, get those proactive alerts at aka.ms/OneDrive/join. You can find myself at LinkedIn at /srice08 and Arvind at ArvindMishra1.
You can reach us on Twitter at OneDrive. And if you've got a question, just tag it with #SyncUp and we'll make sure we find that and get back to you. You can also visit our page for links and resources and more at aka.ms/syncup.
If you want to send us questions directly, hit us up on email at syncupquestions@microsoft.com. Don't forget to subscribe to SyncUp wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoy SyncUp or find it useful, tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best way to get people engaged and help us grow the show. As always, if you're curious about other Microsoft podcasts, check out aka.ms/Microsoft/podcast.
Woo! Thank you for listening to Sync Up. We've been your hosts, Stephen and Arvin, and we'll see you next month.